up on Arirang News. The Bank of Korea keeps the key interest rate unchanged at 3.5% yet again, citing concerns over a rise in home prices and growing household debts. This rate-freeze streak marks the longest in the central bank's history. South Korea and the U.S. are holding a key summertime military exercise, the annual Ulchi Freedom Shield. As part of it, the country held nationwide anti-air raid drills, while in Busan, civil, government, military, and police all came together to counter terrorism for maritime facilities. COVID-19 is showing signs of slowing, but health authorities will strengthen medical systems in case of a resurgence during the Chuseok holiday. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. We start with the central bank's latest decision regarding its base rate, which remains unchanged at 3.5%, marking the longest rate freeze streak. In the meantime, South Korea's growth outlook for this year has been slightly cut to 2.4%. Our correspondent Lee Soo-jin has the numbers.
The Bank of Korea has held its benchmark interest rate steady at 3.5% in a decision that was announced on Thursday following the second Monetary Policy Committee meeting of the second half of the year.
We have unanimously decided that it would be appropriate to maintain our current monetary tightening stance while inflation is slowing, because we need to monitor the impact that real estate policies and global risk aversion will have on financial stability.
This is the 13th time in a row that the BOK has decided not to change the rate, its longest rate freeze streak. The base rate was last raised in January 2023 to the current 3.5% and has been left steady since then. The rate freeze decision this month comes despite inflation remaining in the 2% range for 4 straight months. Recent data shows that the country's consumer price index, a key gauge of inflation, rose 2.6% in July compared to the same month last year. This is higher than it was in June, though, when consumer prices rose by 2.4%. There are also ongoing concerns about growing household debt and housing prices. Data released by the Bank of Korea on Tuesday showed that the country's balance of household credit, an indicator of household debt, reached the highest level on record on a quarterly basis, mostly due to mortgages. This comes as home prices in total went up by 0.76% compared to the previous month, the largest rise seen since December 2019, according to the Korea Real Estate Board. The BOK's decision was also influenced by the U.S. Central Bank, which in its most recent meeting decided to keep interest rates unchanged. The Fed, however, is widely expected to cut interest rates from as early as September.
Recent revisions have shown that while the U.S. labor market is not bad, it's not as strong as the preliminary figures made it out to be. The BOK will follow in the meeting on October to lower Korea's interest rates by the same 25 basis points.
Also on Thursday, the BOK lowered its economic growth outlook for this year to 2.4% from 2.5%. The BOK said that it did so because the previous forecast was based on large growth in the first quarter, which is mostly due to temporary factors. And this year's inflation forecast was also lowered to 2.5%. Moving forward, the Bank of Korea says it will remain vigilant in keeping inflation under control and will decide on the timing of rate cuts while monitoring economic growth. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, speculation is mounting about a rate cut in September by the U.S. Federal Reserve following the release of July's meeting minutes. Lee Sing-jae has the details.
From March 2022 to July 2023, the U.S. Federal Reserve raised its key interest rate a total of 11 times. Since then, the benchmark lending rate has remained in the 5.25 to 5.5% range. However, that could change next month with the Federal Open Market Committee set to make its next rate decision. According to minutes of the FOMC from July 30th to 31st, released on Wednesday, the vast majority of members believe it would be appropriate to lower the benchmark interest rate in September if economic indicators proceed as expected. Watchers are anticipating a 50 basis point cut, in line with the Chicago Mercantile Exchange Group Fed Watch, which indicated a 39% chance that the U.S. Central Bank would lower the benchmark interest rate by 50 basis points next month. Recent employment figures released by Washington further fuel the prospect of a rate cut next month. According to the U.S. Department of Labor's Bureau of Labor Statistics on Wednesday, the U.S. job market is not as hot as initially thought. Data showed that there were 818,000 fewer jobs in March of this year than initially reported. This means that the U.S. job growth from April 2023 to March 2024 was about 30% lower than previously reported, marking the biggest downward revision since 2009. Traditionally, the U.S. Fed cuts rates on poor employment data, with the latest figures putting pressure on policymakers to cut rates. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The nationwide air raid drill that's carried out every year to better prepare the country in case of an attack from North Korea was held this afternoon. People were instructed to seek shelter and traffic was blocked in certain areas. Peunji reports.
Air raid sirens blared across the country at 2 p.m. on Thursday as South Korea held its annual air raid drill. During the 20-minute drill that was carried out to raise public awareness of emergency response measures, pedestrians on the street were required to move to designated shelters or nearby underground spaces. Traffic was blocked in some areas, including downtown Seoul, as drivers were instructed to pull to the side of the road while traffic lights remained on red for 5 minutes to allow passengers and vehicles to safely evacuate. There are about 17,000 shelters across the country, installed in places such as apartment basements and subway stations. Also during the 20-minute drill, the country's Air Force carried out a training exercise, simulating an attack involving an enemy fighter jet. F-15K, F-A-50, and T-50 fighters took part. Thursday's drill was carried out on the last day of the 4-day Ulji civil defense exercises, held alongside the ongoing Ulji Freedom Shield drills, which South Korean and U.S. troops began on Monday to boost joint readiness against threats from North Korea. During this week's civil defense drills, the Defense Ministry said it held a meeting to discuss the nation's response measures in case of a nuclear attack from North Korea. In the meeting that involved the military and 11 different government agencies, they reviewed the country's defense posture against a possible nuclear attack and discussed detailed plans to support chemical, biological, radiological, and medical units. Meanwhile, military officials from Seoul and Washington have been watching closely for a potential provocation from North Korea, as Pyongyang has been strongly criticizing the Ulji Freedom Shield combined exercises, calling them a rehearsal for an invasion. Peunji, Arirang News.
Staying with the Ulji exercise, it has brought civil, government, military, and police together for an integrated defense drill at the port city of Busan to counter terrorism for maritime facilities. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung brings us the highlights.
Around 10 enemy drones approached the Busan port. South Korea's military immediately fires Vulcan cannons and Shingung surface-to-air missiles to target them. The terrorists then try to escape overseas using a passenger ship. But the Navy, Coast Guard, and military police swiftly surround and infiltrate the ship, preventing the terrorists from fleeing. And on land, military armored vehicles block their escape route. Then, special forces from the military and police hijack a bus to shoot down the terrorists. The training, which took place on Wednesday, was conducted as part of the Ulji Freedom Shield exercise. It reflected North Korea's increasingly diverse provocations, including terrorism against multi-use and maritime facilities, as well as drone attacks. The drill involved around 300 people from nearly 40 civilian, government, military, and police agencies.
We will continue to conduct drills reflecting the complex and diverse situations to establish a perfect counterterrorism posture.
Relevant agencies vowed to continue working to further strengthen their joint defense posture in the future. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
In other news, the number of coronavirus infections began showing a downward trend this week, while medical systems are being tightened amid the summer resurgence. Choi Soo-young has the details.
The increasing trend of COVID-19 in patients in South Korea during this summer has declined this week compared to last week. The quarantine authorities said the number of patients from 220 hospitals nationwide increased by about 55% in the second week of August, from 880 to 1,366, while it rose by 5.7% in the third week, reaching 1,444. The authorities predicted that this trend will peak later this month before decreasing, stating that the current management system is sufficient to handle the situation. In case of a potential uptick in cases, the government said on Thursday it will strengthen medical systems, especially in preparation for the Chuseok holiday, which is about a month away.
Government will operate a thorough medical system checkup during the Chuseok holiday to ensure there are no gaps in services. If the COVID-19 outbreak continues and more emergency patients arise, the government will ensure that more hospitals and clinics are on duty compared to previous years.
It has announced that treatment medicines for about 180,000 people will be distributed starting next week, planning to cover high-risk groups until October. These supplies, including test kits, will be provided more steadily through the general healthcare system after October. The Health Ministry recently said the effective vaccines against the current variants will be supplied starting in October, urging people to follow personal hygiene measures. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
As South Korea continues to battle a record-breaking heat wave, more than 3,000 people have suffered from heat-related illnesses this summer. The country's Disease Control and Prevention Agency reported 21 new heat-related patients on Thursday, bringing the total to 3,019. This is the second highest number in history, following the record set in 2018 when South Korea went through one of its worst heat waves. But this figure is expected to rise even more, as the heat wave is expected to persist throughout early September. Authorities have been urging people to avoid outdoor activities during the hottest hours between 12 p.m. and 5 p.m. and drink plenty of water to prevent dehydration. Celebrating South Korea's record-breaking performances at the Paris Olympics, President Yoon has pledged to break down old and outdated customs in professional sports and to provide fair competition for everyone. The pledge came as President Yoon on Thursday hosted a celebration for the Olympians at a hotel in Seoul with 270 athletes, coaches, and sports administrators. Among the athletes were the likes of the gold medal-winning archery teams and badminton gold medalist An Se-young. Jung Il-sun, the CEO of Hyundai Motor Group and the chief of the nation's archery administration, was also there. Also, to hype up the celebrations, K-pop superstars New Jeans performed Hype Boy and a few other songs. In addition, President Yoon awarded Citizens Appreciation Medals to 11 athletes and 5 coaches. Korean films have been performing well in theaters, with mid-budget movies such as Escape, starring Lee Jae-hoon and Koo Kyo-hwan, being big hits during the peak summer season in July. According to the Korean Film Council's industry report released on Thursday, the number of Korean film admissions in July reached 5.6 million, a 69% increase from the same month last year. This figure also surpassed the pre-pandemic July average by around 8% from 2017 to 2019. The council analyzed that the existing box office formula of major motion pictures, the so-called tentpole movies, are fading away. Mid-budget movies can break even with around 2 million tickets sold. As electric vehicles become used more and more, concerns surrounding their safety are also rising with incidents of electric vehicle fires. The South Korean government is soon due to announce a comprehensive plan to address this. Our Moon Hye-ryun has more.
It all began on August 1st when a fire broke out in the underground parking lot of an apartment complex in Incheon. A Mercedes-Benz EQE electric car using Foros's energy batteries appeared to spontaneously catch on fire, consequently destroying 87 other vehicles and damaging 783 more. While forensic police investigations are expected to take around a month, the incident sparked fears over the safety of electric vehicles. According to data from K-Car, a South Korean auto trading platform, the number of EVs put up for sale nearly doubled the week following the fire compared to the week before. A different used car platform, N-Car, showed that prices this month of some popular EVs such as Hyundai Motors Ioniq 5 and Kia's EV6 fell in contrast to last month, as did Tesla's Model 3 and Model Y. In response, the government advised EV firms to release information on battery manufacturers used in their vehicles to ease consumer concerns last week. Next month, it plans to release a more comprehensive solution.
The question of whether or not to make labeling the manufacturer of EV batteries mandatory will be included in the comprehensive measures to be announced in early September, along with other content.
Despite the fact that it has not been made mandatory as of yet, most EV firms selling in South Korea stepped up to release information about the manufacturers of batteries used in their vehicles, starting with Hyundai Motor and including the likes of foreign automakers such as Tesla. The majority of EVs listed use South Korean batteries, while around a quarter use Chinese batteries. Experts expect disclosing manufacturer information for EV batteries to benefit both consumers and domestic EV battery firms.
I think the effect of mistakes made during manufacturing is actually greater than the effect of surrounding temperature or overcharging. Personally, I think revealing manufacturer information would be effective, so manufacturers will be more responsible when making their products.
In recent years, China has rapidly gained ground in the global EV battery market due to its strong cost competitiveness. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
In the U.S., Minnesota Governor Tim Walz was officially named the Democratic vice presidential candidate at the DNC for the November election. Key figures took the stage at the convention to support for Kamala Harris as the next president. Yoon tells us more.
The Democratic Party officially named Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as their vice presidential candidate on Wednesday for the November 2024 election. During the third night of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, the 60-year-old Minnesota governor took the stage to deliver his keynote speech and accept the nomination.
It's the honor of my life to accept your nomination for Vice President of the United States.
Now the race is set for a matchup between Walz and his Republican opponent, Senator J.D. Vance, who has built a reputation as a strong conservative voice and former venture capitalist. Walz has a military background with the U.S. Army National Guard and experience as a high school teacher and football coach. A poll released Wednesday by AP found that 36% of Americans view Walz favorably, compared to 27% for Vance. However, the poll also found that many Americans are still unfamiliar with both candidates. The night showcased speeches in support of Vice President Kamala Harris as the next president, featuring figures like former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and former President Bill Clinton. Clinton thanked President Joe Biden for his courage and sacrifice, highlighting how Biden's decision to step down will enhance his legacy. Media personality Oprah Winfrey surprised the crowd with a powerful speech centered on freedom.
But more than anything else, let us choose freedom. Why? Because that's the best of America.
Harris will formally accept the Democratic Party's nomination and deliver the keynote speech on Thursday, the last night of the convention. The first TV debate between the two vice presidential candidates is set for October 1st. Yoon, Arirang News.
U.S. President Joe Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reportedly spoke on the phone on Wednesday about efforts to ensure a halt in fighting in Gaza and safe passage for hostages taken by the latter last October. According to the White House, President Biden underscored the urgency of sealing the latest ceasefire and hostage deal as negotiators prepare to meet in Cairo for related talks. The two leaders also touched upon ongoing U.S. commitment to defending Israel against threats from Iran and militant groups in the region. Vice President Kamala Harris is also said to have joined the phone call. Elsewhere, Russia's defense ministry claims its air forces shot down about a dozen Ukrainian drones over Moscow in the largest air raid against its capital area since the start of its war in 2022. Yoon has more.
Russia's defense ministry said its air defenses repelled a total of 45 drones in Russian territory on Wednesday, including 11 over the Moscow region, 23 over the border region of Bryansk, and 6 over the Belgorod region. Russian authorities, as well as the mayor of Moscow, called it among the most significant attacks on Moscow by Ukrainian drones since the start of the war in February 2022. According to the acting governor of the Bryansk region, no injuries or major damage was reported in the Moscow or Bryansk regions, but in the Kursk region, 1 woman was killed and 2 other people hospitalized. Ukraine previously targeted Russia's capital in July 2023 when drones struck 2 non-residential buildings, and a second time in November 2023 when Moscow was reported to have stopped more than 20 drones. The overnight drone attacks came as Ukrainian forces continued to push into Russia's western Kursk region. Ukraine's strike on 3 key bridges in the last week has trapped Russian forces, as well as crippling their logistical capabilities. Russia subsequently built at least 3 pontoon bridges across the Sime River, but at least one of those is confirmed to have been destroyed by a Ukrainian drone on Wednesday. While stretched thin, Ukrainian forces are moving towards the goal of its land incursion into the Kursk region, which Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said is to create a buffer zone as well as weaken the Russian military. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin continues to claim that the Ukrainian attacks are acts of terrorism.
The same way we fought with terrorists previously, now we fight with those who commit crimes in the Kursk region, Donbass and Novorossiya. But the same way we achieved our goals in the fight against terrorism, we will achieve our goals in the fight against neo-Nazism. And we will certainly punish the criminals. There can be no doubt about that.
And going on with business as usual, Putin welcomed Chinese Premier Li Qiang to Moscow on Wednesday, praising the close economic and trade relations between the 2 countries, while there was no indication of whether the ongoing war with Ukraine was discussed. Yoon, Arirang News.
A fatal car accident in New Zealand has killed 3 members of a South Korean ski team. Media in New Zealand reports that the crash occurred at about 3:15 p.m. on Wednesday when a passenger vehicle collided with a 4-wheel drive on a highway in the Arirang area on the country's South Island. According to the local police, the accident killed 3 Koreans and injured 2 more, including another Korean national. The ski team was reportedly visiting the country to take part in a competition and was on their way back after finishing training. South Korea's foreign ministry said it is providing consular assistance to the families of the victims, but did not provide further details.
Seoul broke another record for the longest run of tropical nights, with last night being 32 days in a row. Today, the hot weather continued with rain across the country. As warm westerly winds flow into Korea, temperatures will rise again. From tomorrow, scorching heat of around 33 degrees Celsius will continue with frequent showers. There will be showers around the western parts of the country until tomorrow evening. The amount of rainfall will be as low as 5 to 20 millimeters, but you should take an umbrella with you that's easy to carry because it will suddenly start to pour down. Tomorrow, Seoul and Daegu will start off at 26 degrees. Highs will move up to 32 in Seoul, Chuncheon, Daejeon, and Gwangju, Jeju, Gyeongju 36 degrees. Showers will pass over Gangwon-do province on Saturday. Tropical nights and heat waves are expected to continue until the end of this month. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we have for today. Thank you for watching. Arirang News will be back at 9 a.m. Korea time.
There is no greater blessing than to have good health.